Hello, everyone, and welcome to Week 3, NUR 491 Critical Issues and Strategies in Nursing. I am your professor, Dr. Marian Johnson. I hope everybody's had a successful, fun-filled first 2 weeks. You're all doing a great job, great participation. Keep the text message coming for any questions. Email me, call me, however you see fit to do so. This week we are going to start our Week 3 lecture with critical thinking, decision making, and problem solving. Nurse managers are expected to use knowledge from various disciplines to solve problems with patients, staff, and the organization, as well as problems in their own personal and professional lives. They must make decisions in dynamic situations such as, after a position vacates, should we refill it, given the tighter economy? Is the present policy requiring 12-hour shifts adequate for both patient and nurses? Which is the best staffing pattern to prevent turnover and ensure quality patient care? What is the best time to have staff meetings and council meetings in order to involve the night shift too? This chapter explains and differentiates critical thinking, decision making, and problem solving, and describes processes and techniques for using each. Critical thinking. Critical thinking is the process for examining underlying assumptions, interpreting and evaluating arguments, imagining and exploring alternatives, and developing a reflective criticism for the purpose of reaching a conclusion that can be justified. Critical thinking is not the same as criticism, though it does call for inquiring attitudes, knowledge about evidence and analysis, and skills to combine them. Critical thinking skills can be used to solve problems rationally. Identifying, analyzing, and questioning the evidence and implications of each problem stimulate and eliminate critical thought processes. Critical thinking is also an essential component of decision making. However, compared to problem solving and decision making, which involves seeking a single solution, critical thinking is a higher level of cognitive process that includes creativity, problem solving, and decision making. That's from Figure 8.1. Critical thinking in nursing. The need for critical thinking in nursing has long been accepted. Zori, Nosek, and Musil, 2010, used the Californian Critical Thinking Disposition Inventory to measure critical thinking in nurses. The researchers found that nurses supervised by managers with higher critical thinking skills, perceived their work environment to be more positive than those whose managers scored lower on critical thinking skills. Case scenarios and discussions of clinical experiences taught newly licensed nurses critical thinking and improved their retention rate in one facility. Ashcraft, 2010. Bittner and Gravlin, 2009, studied nurses' critical thinking skills when delegating to assistive personnel. They found that the nurses' lack of critical thinking more often resulted in missed or omitted routine care. The Carnegie Foundation's call for reform in nursing education argues, however, that nursing should move beyond critical thinking towards clinical reasoning. and diverse thinking. That's from Biener et al. Of 2009. Using critical thinking. The critical thinking process seems abstract unless it can be related to practical experiences. One way to develop this process is to consider a series of questions when examining a specific problem or making a decision such as, what are the underlying assumptions? Underlying assumptions are unquestioned beliefs that influence an individual's reasoning. They are perceptions that may or may not be grounded in reality. For example, some people believe the AIDS epidemic is punishment for homosexual behavior. This attitude toward people with AIDS could alter one's approach to care for an AIDS patient. How is evidence interpreted? What is the context? Interpretation of information can also be value-laden. Is the evidence presented completely and clearly? Can the facts be substantiated? Are the people presenting the evidence using emotional or biased information? Are there any errors in the reasoning? How are the arguments to be evaluated? Is there objective evidence to support the arguments? Have all value preferences been determined? Is there a good chance that the arguments will be accepted? Are there enough people to support decisions? Have all value preferences been determined? Is there a good chance that the arguments will be accepted? Are there enough people to support decisions? Healthcare organizations were able to change to smoke-free environments once societal values favored non-smokers and public policies reflected those values. What are the possible alternative perspectives? Using different basic assumptions and paradigms can help the critical thinker develop several different views of an issue. Compare how a nurse manager who assumes that more RNs equal better care will deal with a budget cut with a manager who is committed to add in assistive personnel instead. What evidence supports the alternatives? What solutions do staff members, patients, physicians, and others propose? What would be the ideal alternative? Critical thinking skills are used throughout the nursing process. See Table 8.1. Nurses can build on knowledge base they begun acquiring in school to make critical thinking process a conscious one in daily activities. Learning to be a critical thinker requires a commitment over time, but the skills can be learned. Creativity. Creativity is an essential part of the critical thinking process. Creativity is the ability to develop and implement new and better solutions. Creativity demands a certain amount of exposure to outside contacts, receptiveness to new and seemingly strange ideas, a certain amount of freedom, and some permissive management. Most nurses, however, are employed in bureaucratic settings that do not foster creativity. Control is exercised over staff, and rigid adherence to formal channels of communication jeopardizes innovation. In addition, there's little room for failure, and when failures do occur, they are not well tolerated. When staff are afraid of the consequences of failure, their creativity is inhibited and innovation does not take place. See later section on innovation. Maintaining a certain level of creativity is one way to keep an organization alive. New employees who are not encumbered with details of accepted practices often can make suggestions based on their prior experiences or insights before they get set in their ways or have their innovative ideas turned off. The advantages offered by new employees should be explored because all staff gain from such use of valuable human resources. Here's my mug again. I followed my heart, and it led me to coffee. Those who missed it last time. The climate must promote the survival of potential useful ideas. The nurse manager can foster a climate of support by giving new ideas a fair and adequate hearing, and thereby reduce the tendency to discourage the creative process in individuals and within groups. The challenge for nurse managers is to know when and for whom and to what extent control is appropriate. If creativity does have a priority in the healthcare setting, then the reward system should be geared to and commensurate with that priority. Creativity has 4 stages: preparation, incubation, insight, and verification. Even people who think they are not naturally creative can learn this process. Preparation. A carefully designed planning program is essential. First, acquire information necessary to understand the situation. Individuals can do this on their own, or groups can work together. The process follows this sequence. Pick a specific task, gather relevant facts, challenge every detail, develop preferred solutions, implement improvements. Incubation. After all the information available has been gathered, allow as much time as possible to elapse before deciding on solutions. Insight. Often solutions emerge after a period of reflection that would not have occurred to anyone without this time lapse. Verification. Once a solution has been implemented, evaluate it for effectiveness. You may need to restart the process or go back another step and create a different solution. Decision making. Considering all the practice individuals get in making decisions, it would seem they might become very good at it. However, the number of decisions a person makes does not correspond to the person's skill at making them. The assumption is that decision making comes naturally, like breathing. It does not. The decision-making process described in this chapter provides nurses with a system for making decisions that is applicable to any decision. It is a useful procedure for making practical choices, not a decision. A decision not to solve a problem is also a decision. Although decision-making and problem-solving appear similar, they are not synonymous. Decision-making may or may not involve a problem, but it always involves selecting one of the several alternatives, each of which may be appropriate under certain circumstances. Problem solving, on the other hand, involves diagnosing a problem and solving it, which may or may not entail deciding on one correct solution. Most of the time, decision making is a subset of problem solving. However, some decisions are not of a problem solving nature, such as decisions about scheduling, equipment, or in-services. Types of decisions. The types of problems nurses and nurse managers encounter and the decisions that they must make vary widely and determine the problem-solving or decision-making methods they should use. Relatively well-defined, common problems can usually be solved with routine decisions, often using established rules, policies, and procedures. For instance, when a nurse makes a medication error, the manager's actions are guided by policy and the report form. Routine decisions are more often made by first-level managers than by top administrators. Adaptive decisions are necessary when both problems and alternative solutions are somewhat unusual and only partially understood. Often they are modifications of other well-known problems and solutions. Managers must make innovative decisions when problems are unusual and unclear, and when creative, novel solutions are necessary. Decision-making conditions. The conditions surrounding decision-making can vary and change dramatically. Consider the total system. Whatever solutions are created will succeed only if they are compatible with another part of the system. Decisions are made under conditions of certainty, risk, or uncertainty. Decision-making under certainty. When you know the alternatives and the conditions surrounding each alternative, a state of certainty is said to exist. Suppose a nurse manager on a unit with acutely ill patients wants to decrease the number of venipunctures a patient experiences when an IV is started, as well as reduce costs of resulting from failed venipunctures. 3 alternatives exist. Establish an IV team on all shifts to minimize IV attempts and reduce costs. Establish a reciprocal relationship with the anesthesia department to start IVs when nurses experience difficulty. Set a standard of 2 insertion attempts per nurse per patient, although this does not substantially lower equipment costs. The manager knows the alternatives, IV team, anesthesia department standards, and the conditions associated with each option, reduced costs, assistance with starting IVs, minimum attempts, and some cost reduction. A condition of strong certainty is said to exist, and a decision can be made with full knowledge of what the payoff probably will be. Decision making under uncertainty and risk. Seldom do decision makers know everything is to know about a subject or situation. If everything was known, the decision would be obvious for all to realize. Most critical decision making in organizations is done under conditions of uncertainty and risk. The individual or group making the decision does not know all the alternatives, attendant risks, or possible consequences of each option. Uncertainty and risk are inevitable because of the complex and dynamic nature of healthcare organizations. Here is an example. If the weather forecaster predicts a 40% chance of snow, the nurse manager is operating in a situation of risk when trying to decide how to staff the unit for the next 24 hours. In a risk situation, availability of each alternative, potential successes, and costs are all associated with probability estimates. Probability is the likelihood, expressed as a percentage, and an event will or will not occur. If something is certain to happen, its probability is 100%. If it is certain not to happen, its probability is 0%. If there is a 50-50 chance, its probability is 50%. Here's another example. Suppose a nurse manager decides to use agency nurses to staff a unit during heavy vacation periods. Two agencies look attractive, and the manager must decide between them. Agency A has had modest growth over the past 10 years and offers the manager a 3-month contract, freezing wages during that time. In addition, the unit will have first choice of available nurses. Agency B is much more dynamic and charges more, but explains that the reason they have a high rate of growth is that their nurses are the best and the highest paid in the area. The nurse manager can choose Agency A, which will provide a safe, constant supply of nursing personnel, or B, which promises better care but a higher cost. The key element in decision-making under conditions of risk is to determine the probabilities of each alternative as accurately as possible. The nurse manager can use a probability analysis whereby expected risk is calculated or estimated. Using the probability analysis shown in Table 8.2, it appears as though Agency A offers the best outcome. However, if the second agency had a 90% chance of filling shifts and a 50% chance of fixing costs, a completely different situation would exist. The nurse manager might decide that the potential for increased costs was a small trade-off for having more highly qualified nurses and the best probability of having the unit fully staffed during vacation periods. Object probability is the likelihood that an event will or will not occur based on facts and reliable information. Subjective probability is the likelihood that an event will or will not occur based on a manager's personal judgment and beliefs. The decision-making process. The rationale decision-making module is a series of steps that managers take in an effort to make logical, well-grounded, rational choices that maximize the achievement of objectives. First, identify all possible outcomes. Examine the probability of each alternative, and then take the action that yields the highest probability of achieving the most desirable outcome. Not all steps are used in every decision, nor are they always used in the same order. The rationale decision-making module is thought of as the ideal but often cannot be fully used. Individuals seldom make major decisions at a single point in time and often are unable to recall when a decision was finally reached. Some major decisions are the result of many small actions or incremental choices the person makes without regarding larger issues. In addition, decision processes are likely to be characterized more by confusion, disorder, and emotionality than by rationality. For these reasons, it is best to develop appropriate technical skills and the capacity to find a good balance between lengthy processes and quick, decisive action. The descriptive rationality module, developed by Simon in 1955 and supported by research in the 1990s, Simon of 1993, emphasizes the limitations of the rationality of the decision maker and the situation. It recognizes three ways in which decision makers depart from the rational decision making module. The decision maker's search for possible objectives or alternative solutions is limited because of time, energy, and money. People frequently lack adequate information about problems and cannot control conditions under which they operate. Individuals often use a satisfying strategy. Satisficing is not a misspelled word. It is a decision-making strategy whereby the individual chooses an alternative that is not ideal, but either is good enough, suffices under existing circumstances to meet the minimum standards of acceptance, or is the first acceptable alternative. Many problems in nursing are ineffectively solved by satisficing strategies. Individuals who solve problems using satisficing may lack specific training in problem solving and decision making. They may view their units or areas of responsibility as drastically simplified modules of the real world and be content with the simplification because it allows them to make decisions with relatively simple rules of thumb or from force of habit. The political decision-making modules describe the process in terms of the particular interests and objectives of powerful stakeholders, such as hospital boards, medical staff, corporate officers, and regulatory bodies. Power is an ability to influence or control how problems and objectives are defined. What alternative solutions are considered and selected? What information flows? And ultimately, what decisions are made? See Chapter 7. The decision-making process begins when a gap exists between what is actually happening and what should be happening, and it ends with action that will narrow or close the gap. The simplest way to learn decision-making skills is to integrate a model into one's thinking by breaking the components down into individual steps. The 7 steps of decision-making process are as applicable to personal problems as they are to nursing management problems. Each step is elaborated by pertinent questions clarifying the statements, and they should be followed in order in which they are presented. Decision-making techniques. Decision-making techniques vary according to the nature of the problem or topic, the decision maker, the context of situation, and the decision-making method or process. For routine decisions, choices that are tried and true can be made for well-defined, known situations or problems, well-designed policies, rules, and standard operating procedures can produce satisfactory results within a minimum of time. Artificial intelligence, including programmed computer systems such as expert systems that can store, retrieve, and manipulate data, can diagnose problems and make limited decisions. For adaptive decisions involving moderately ambiguous problems and modifications of known and well-defined alternative solutions, there are a variety of techniques. Many types of decision grids or tables can be used to compare outcomes of alternative solutions. Decisions about units or services can be facilitated with analysis comparing output, revenue, and costs over time or under different conditions. Analyzing the costs and revenues of a proposed new service is an example. Regardless of the decision-making module or strategy chosen, data collection and analysis are essential. In many healthcare organizations, quality teams are using a variety of tools to gather, organize, and analyze data about their work, such as decision grids, flow charts, or cause and effect diagrams. Figure 8.3 illustrates a cause and effect diagram that a team of nurses created to help them improve the documentation process of their ambulatory oncology unit. Another example of a decision tool is the Dynamic Network Analysis Decision Support DYNADS project at the University of Arizona College of Nursing. See www.dynads.nursing.arizona.edu. This simulation project enables the manager to predict the consequences of decisions on patient safety and quality outcomes. The tool simulates virtual nursing units, identifies potential errors, and predicts the likely result. Using the tool, the manager can discover if an innovation or a combination of innovations is likely to be successful. That's from F. Kennett al. of 2010. DYNADS is a decision support tool that improves predictability in today's complex environment.